Picture this. The most terrifying king in European history, screaming in agony as his body literally rots from the inside out. Henry VIII, the monarch who broke England from Rome, who executed 2 wives, who ruled through absolute terror, died in such horrific circumstances that his corpse exploded after death. But here's what they don't teach you in school. His final months weren't just about physical decay. They reveal a man so consumed by paranoia and murderous rage that he nearly destroyed the very dynasty he'd killed thousands to protect. The truth about Henry's last days will shock you to your core. So how did the King of England become a walking nightmare? Let's dive in. January 1547, the most feared monarch in Europe can barely stand. Henry VIII, now 55, drags his massive frame through the corridors of Whitehall Palace, and the smell is unbearable. His leg wounds, festering for over a decade, ooze a putrid mixture of blood and pus that soaks through bandages within hours. Courtiers hold perfumed handkerchiefs to their faces when he passes, but the physical horror is nothing compared to what's happening inside his mind. The man who once danced until dawn, who wrote poetry and played the lute, who charmed foreign ambassadors with his wit, that man is gone. In his place sits a bloated tyrant weighing over 400 pounds, his eyes darting with suspicion at every shadow. Sleep eludes him. Food disgusts him, and the pain, the constant, screaming pain, drives him to fits of rage that terrorize the entire court. Yet something even more sinister lurks beneath the surface. Because Henry's paranoia isn't just madness, he's discovered something that could end the Tudor dynasty forever. But what secret could be so dangerous that it pushes a dying king to his most ruthless act yet? The ulcers aren't just destroying Henry's legs, they're poisoning his entire system. By January 1547, the king's physicians whisper in terrified huddles. They've tried everything, herbs, prayers, even placing freshly killed pigeons on the wounds to draw out the corruption. Nothing works. The infection spreads like wildfire through his bloodstream, and they know what this means. Henry VIII is dying, and he knows it too. But here's where the story takes a chilling turn. Instead of preparing for a peaceful death, Henry becomes obsessed with enemies lurking in every corner. He sees conspiracies in casual conversations, treason in delayed responses to his commands. His paranoia reaches such heights that he begins planning executions from his deathbed, including members of his own family. The Duke of Norfolk, once Henry's most trusted ally, sits in the Tower of London awaiting execution. His crime? Henry suspects him of plotting to claim the throne after the king's death. But Norfolk isn't the only one. Henry's own brother-in-law, Thomas Seymour, finds himself under suspicion too. The question haunting the court is simple. Has the king's mind finally cracked under the weight of pain and power? Or has he uncovered a real conspiracy that threatens everything he's built? The answer will determine who lives and who dies. As Henry's condition worsens, he makes a decision that will haunt England for generations. January the 19th, 1547, the king summons his most trusted advisor, Thomas Cranmer, Archbishop of Canterbury. With trembling hands, Henry signs what will become known as the most controversial document of his reign. Not a treaty or law, but an execution warrant. The name on it, Henry Howard, Earl of Surrey, son of the Duke of Norfolk. Surrey's crime? Writing poetry that Henry interprets as treasonous ambition. This isn't just paranoia. This is the calculated destruction of England's oldest noble family. The Howards have served the crown for centuries, but Henry sees them as a threat to his 9-year-old son, Edward's future reign. So he decides to eliminate them, starting with Surrey's execution on January 19th. But here's the shocking twist that changes everything. As Surrey walks to the scaffold, Henry's own health takes a catastrophic turn. The king who ordered the execution can barely lift his head from his pillow. His breathing becomes labored, his pulse erratic. The courtiers realize with growing horror that Henry might die before Surrey's father, the Duke of Norfolk, can be executed. If Henry dies first, Edward becomes king, and Norfolk, as the highest-ranking noble in England, could claim the regency. The very scenario Henry tried to prevent through murder might happen anyway. The irony is devastating, and it's about to get much worse. January 27th, 1547, Henry VIII's final hours arrive with terrifying violence. At 2 a.m., courtiers wake to the sound of the king screaming. Not from pain, but from pure, uncontrolled rage. Sir Anthony Denny, his closest gentleman, rushes to the royal bedchamber to find Henry thrashing against his pillows, his face purple, with fury, spittle flying from his lips as he shouts accusations at invisible enemies. But what he screams next makes even his most loyal servants back away in terror. Henry begins naming names, listing courtiers, nobles, even his own daughter Mary as potential traitors who deserve death. His voice, once commanding and melodious, now sounds like the growling of a wounded beast. He demands writing materials, to sign more execution warrants, but his hands shake so violently that he can barely hold a quill. Then comes the moment that witnesses will never forget. At dawn, Henry suddenly falls silent. His breathing becomes shallow, erratic. Sir Anthony Denny realizes the end is near and asks if the king wants a priest. Henry's response is barely a whisper, but those who hear it turn pale with shock. What does he say? Some claim it was a confession of his greatest sin. Others believe it was the location of a hidden treasure. But most witnesses take the secret to their graves. By 2 a.m. on January 28th, the mighty Henry VIII, the king who defied the Pope, who married 6 times, who executed over 70,000 people during his reign, draws his final breath. But his death is only the beginning of the horror. The moment Henry's heart stops beating, something unthinkable happens to his corpse. Within hours of his death, the king's body begins decomposing at an alarming rate. The same infections that tortured him in life now consume him in death. His abdomen swells grotesquely as gases build up inside. The stench becomes so overwhelming that even the embalmers flee the room. Then on February 14th comes the moment that will haunt English history forever. As Henry's coffin rests overnight at Sion Abbey during the funeral procession to Windsor, witnesses report hearing a loud crack from inside the lead-lined casket. By morning, a dark, putrid liquid seeps from the joints of the coffin onto the stone floor. Henry's body has literally burst open from internal pressure. Wild dogs, drawn by the smell, are found licking the leaked fluids from the abbey floor. This grotesque scene fulfills a prophecy made years earlier by Friar Pato, who Henry had banished for criticizing his break from Rome. Pato had warned that dogs would lick Henry's blood, just as they had licked King Ahab's blood in the Bible. The parallel is impossible to ignore. Both kings died as tyrants who defied God's law. But perhaps the most tragic irony of all is this. Henry's obsession with securing the Tudor dynasty fails spectacularly. His son Edward died at 15. His daughter Mary dies childless after 5 years of brutal religious persecution, and his daughter Elizabeth, despite her legendary reign, dies without an heir, ending the Tudor line forever. The man who destroyed lives, marriages, and England's religious unity to secure his bloodline ultimately achieves nothing but his own horrific end. The death of Henry VIII reminds us that absolute power corrupts absolutely, and that even kings must face the consequences of their actions. His story connects us across centuries, from England's royal palaces to our modern democracies. If you found this dark chapter of history as fascinating as we did, help us uncover more untold stories by hitting that subscribe button and giving this video a like. And we'd love to hear from our viewers in the USA, UK, Canada, and Australia. Which historical figures' final days should we explore next? Drop your suggestions in the comments below.